fellas. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for upfront for opening up and being vulnerable, because I know this is not going to be easy for all of us. Doug, you said it this morning as we had breakfast before this, that every time you see us, it's like a reminder of Mikey. That's just, when I see you guys, it's the same exact thing. And I don't want that to be that way, but maybe it just is. But guys, I want the audience to learn a little about you guys. So Doug, we'll start with you, where you're born, raised, what led you to the SEAL teams and your SEAL career, and then Benny.
Thanks for having us. Born and raised in Georgia, middle class family. Graduated high school, held a couple different jobs, positions, always had an affinity for the military, always read the old Vietnam era books, MACV, those types of things, what the SEALs did in Vietnam, what the Rangers did in Vietnam, the LRPs, etc. And for whatever reason, didn't come from a traditional military family background. Grandfather was in World War II. Father was in National Guard during Vietnam time. But I just couldn't shake the bug of wanting to go and, join and see if I could make it through the program. I did that 2000, and wound up at requesting all East Coast teams, and unbeknownst to me, best thing that could ever happen, wound up at SEAL Team 3. Did my first 3 platoons there, half of me all my formative years at SEAL Team 3. Best time of my life. I remember distinctly walking down the back stairs of SEAL Team 3 for the last time, taking my first, billet somewhere other than the team, and it was a sad moment, Did 3 platoons there, did a stint as a BUDS instructor for a couple of years, did 5 years almost at SRT-1, following, Ramadi 05, 06 time frame. Did a stint up in Kodiak, Alaska, and then, some of the stuff we're going to talk about later, leadership-wise, did a stint at our logistical support unit, supporting all the West Coast teams. We have a handful of SEALs that work there, kind of bridging the gap between the Loggy side of the house and the SEAL side of the house, which, coincidentally set me up for after my career. I retired in about 6 months after sitting around twiddling my thumbs wondering, okay, what's life got left for me here? A friend of mine owns a company, builds rocket launchers, brought me out. We talked about it this morning as well. Brought me out, and as I always jokingly tell him, because he was a Vietnam era Marine, and we give each other a lot of grief about our choices, and basically I sealed it. I came in and I, did my senior enlisted SEAL thing and looked at it and offered some what I thought was, sage observations, and one thing led to another, and now I'm running that company as his president. So, it's been great for me. It's been a great honor, kind of transitioning out of the military. A lot of us get stuck with what's next in life. It's a very difficult transition, especially at least from our community. So having something that drives you, something you're committed to for whatever reason, allowed me the opportunity to make, I would say, a much better transition than some guys that I know. It's back to what I lived for all those years in the community. It's travel, it's hotels, it's living out of a bag, but it's, trying to give yourself to a greater purpose. And it's, as a senior enlisted, retired, and now here in the current role, it is continuing to deal with those types of leadership hurdles. So that's where I'm at today.
Benny, I think it's safe to say for the audience, we've got to say this, that Doug was well suited for the job he's doing now, because he always had something modified to all his weapons, which I think technically we're not supposed to do, but he was always trying to find a way to make the weapon systems more effective.
You know how you do that, though? You have to, one, you have to be a gear junkie. We call it something else, but clean podcast here. But gear junkie, and then what you have to do is you have to sell the most senior person that's got the most pull on it at the team, and I did that. So it allowed me the latitude to, do some things here and there.
The one thing I respected about you is you were always looking for the 1% advantage, because if you stack up enough of those 1% advantages, they start to add up, and you had a curiosity in your belly about how to make things better, which the best leaders I've always seen, regardless of how much tenure they have, they don't sit on their laurels. They're always asking, like, hey, this may be tradition, but if tradition is no longer relevant, how do we do it better?
I do have to say, though, that he brought out a 1911 one time that he had that 1% advantage on, and I just had our normal issued Sig Sauer, and we were doing a pistol competition, and I still beat him, and I won the shotgun that tournament or whatever. So he might be trying to get those one-up advantages, but it all just sometimes comes down to the operator. So,
Dude, touche.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll always one-up each other on the show. That's just that's the competitive military way. Benny.
So, again, yeah, thank you. This is definitely an honor. It's a privilege to be able to do this. I was born and raised in central Wisconsin. Average kid, did the hunting and the fishing growing up. I would say I was an average student. Wasn't too driven in school, so my idea of going on to college wasn't a thing. So I ended up going kind of the military route, and my parents were on board with it. So they actually had to sign me in when I was 17. And I remember going to the recruiting station, and this was, I was still kind of torn between, do I go, Navy, Marines, Army? I didn't really have a chosen path yet. But I got to the Navy recruiting office, and I remember there being a poster hanging there. And that poster, I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was something like, he won't win this year's MVP or be voted to the All-Star team, but then again, some heroes don't play games. And it was a picture of a Navy SEAL coming up out of the water with his rifle. Yeah. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And I think the recruiter probably laughed at me because, I'm only 5'6". I think at the time I was a wrestler in my senior year, so I was only like 112. I was just, 100 pounds soaking wet. So he probably laughed at me, but once you have that goal in your mind and you have that drive, that's what I wanted, and that's what I fought for. So I enlisted in the Navy with a goal and a dream to become a Navy SEAL. Like I say, I was only 17, turned 18 in boot camp, had orders to buds. I got rolled initially for some knee issues, but ended up graduating with class 232, and then checked in SEAL Team 3 right around the same time Doug did. And I was fortunate enough, I did 5 platoons. I went from a brand new guy to post-platoon chief, so that's basically unheard of. Normally, like Doug said, you only do about 3 platoons before you're kind of forced out to rotate and do a different job, kind of give back to the community, whether it's an instructor billet or rotating just to a different duty station. I would say I kind of begged and pleaded to stay at the command, just because I liked being operational. And part of it, I think, was because I didn't want to do any change. I liked deploying. I liked being operational. So like I say, I finished up my platoon chief slot out to Afghanistan, and then I went over to BUDS, became a dive phase instructor during second phase. And then out of BUDS, I got a commissioning as a warrant officer, went over to Team 5 for 2 rotations as a training officer, and when we deployed, I became the current operations officer. And then after that, I was kind of tired of deploying to the desert, so I took orders out to Hawaii. Did my final 3 years out in Hawaii, and I was the operations officer at our training detachment there in Hawaii for the SEAL delivery vehicles. I did 21 and a half years. I thought I was going to be the career 33 CW05 retired, but medically my body started to kind of shut down once I took a desk job, and it was really hard for me to get the word retirement out of my mouth. But once it did, I'm kind of glad I did, and now I don't really look back. My purpose right now is I'm a stay-at-home dad, so I've been doing that for about a year, especially with this whole pandemic going on. My kids are virtual, going to school right now, so it definitely helps to be home with them, which is good. Yeah, that's me right now.
And your nickname was the Badger.
The Badger, yeah.
That's Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, it was.
Or is it because you're the size of a badger?
There's probably a lot more to it. Yes, one from being Wisconsin, size of a badger, and then people could say that I have a sweater, but I have a lot of hair.
Let me ask you guys, especially in the wake of Mikey, when you guys were in charge of training, did you find that extremely rewarding? Training the next generation?
In some respects, yes. In some respects, no. Benny, made a key point about staying operational. When Ramadi 06 happened, and you and I were injured as well. I know Benny was injured. That ended it for me. I had to rotate out, so I had to go to Buds. So, which was not my call, and there's nothing I could do about that. I hated it. But I found myself, I always say this about my time as a Buds instructor, because we all have funny Buds instructor stories. I'd say if you were one of my first year and a half worth of classes, you loved me, because I treated the students like, mini team guys, and always was trying to hook them up and give them little tips here and there on how to get away with stuff. After that, I hated life. I mean, I needed to get back to something else. I needed to get away from being an instructor and back to,
being a team guy.
Being a team guy, yeah. So at least that was my experience as an instructor.
For myself, after doing the 5 platoons and then rotating to an instructor billet, I didn't realize it until I was in the instructor billet that everybody says you need to take a break. And once I got into that billet, I actually felt it. I was like, this is what a break feels like. But as an instructor, I would say that I was hard but fair. So I would challenge the students coming up, but I was, like I say, honest but fair with them. So I wasn't the mean instructor, but I really tried to put forth a positive effort towards them to make them the best that I could, because seeing everything I've done or doing everything I've done, like, I wanted to make them the best that I could.
I think I found that, we talk about leadership and the difference between coaching, teaching, and mentoring. I think we replicate that sometimes in our experiences. If you were, as a Buds candidate, if you had trouble with this, that, or the other, you would find those guys and seek them out and mentor them based on your experiences and try to elevate them and find what made them tick, or at least just encourage them. That, I will say, was rewarding. Finding those guys who were really solid guys that were just having a problem with whatever that is, the swim or run, the shooting. I was a shooting instructor, of course, in third phase. So finding those few students and trying to, as you alluded to, trying to find that 1% advantage, doing away with some of the Buds games that we probably all experience, which is part of the culture, and it's actually part of the goodness, in my opinion. But trying to find those unique advantages to change things that will give those guys that are good guys that deserve to graduate, but they're having trouble, whatever that element is, to get them across the finish line. That was definitely a rewarding experience and something I tried to do.
I think that's what a lot of people get wrong about the SEALs. If we start with the class of 250. The goal is to graduate 250. The reality is different. But our goal is never to drop as many people as we can. There's no point in that. But I mean, it comes down to character, and adversity is, or character is revealed during times of adversity, and that's the whole point of Buds. Doug, I will say, and I know you left Team 3, you wanted to keep on deploying. Where Benny and I had the benefit is we were thrown right back in, which means you don't have to think, which means we can compartmentalize what happened on that last mission and just refocus on a new mission. And there's both good and bad. And it sounds like you were forced to, and you probably compartmentalized to a degree, but you were forced to sort of think more about what had happened. And I could see that not being the greatest environment to do that.
Like most of us, we talked about this morning, I was extremely lucky with some of the guys that I served with previously. Some of my mentors, looking out for me, as we talked about this morning at breakfast. Got some great medical treatment, But all in all, I will say that I was told and advised and mentored by people, take the break. It didn't matter who told me what. It didn't matter who they brought out. It didn't matter what, what person was there to lean on during that time. And even still to this day, I mean, it's a huge compartmentalization, and you just, you throw yourself into the job that you're doing, whether it's a platoon running and gunning or whether it's buzz instructor or what, and unfortunately that compartmentalization is damaging, I think, as an individual, but it's also probably what was one of the keys to my personal success, because you just drive and drive and drive in order to, not have to deal with other things.
It is for special operations as a whole, from what I've seen, to include combat arms, infantry, and all those guys, is compartmentalization is our greatest strength. It's also our biggest weakness. Is that, you can lose a buddy in the moment, you compartmentalize it, you move on to drive on and complete the mission. And for some, they compartmentalize for years, but eventually that pot is going to boil over. And I know it did for all of us in different ways. The whole thing about taking a break, I remember, so after our 2008 deployment, I was getting orders to the East Coast, and the commanding officer who we had a good relationship, tried to provide me some advice. And he said, "Hey, Mike," as he signed my last fit rep, he said, "At some point it becomes about family and you need to take a break." And my response was, "Roger that, sir. Appreciate the advice." Walked out the room, and I'm like, what the fuck is he thinking? I'm going to deploy as many times and for as long as I can. And it wasn't until technically my 11th deployment that I hit a wall. And I didn't think that wall was coming. It came on, it cascaded. And what I realized for guys like us is we, in all our brothers, is you live life in the red for as long as possible. But even the most high-performing race cars can't maintain that. You have to put them in the shop. And we were completely unbalanced in a lot of ways. But that's a testament, to human performance. You guys push the envelopes on that. So both of you, at a SEAL team, when you have 2 deployments under your belt, that's considered experience. And both of you guys had 2 combat deployments under your belt. And so we get back from the 05 deployment, in which mainly NSW forces were in Baghdad doing the personal security detail mission, as well as direct action raids, Habani as well. So you guys get back and you're told, hey, due to the state of the war in Iraq, which things were not going well, you don't have 2 years to get ready to go back. You only have 1 year. And so you guys jump into a training cycle. You're in task unit bruiser with Jocko Willink, and you guys are crushing the training. You're doing well. You're the best task unit. And then 3 weeks from deployment, you find out you're going to the worst place in the world, as voted by Time magazine in 2005, 2006, AR Ramadi, in which at this point it was the caliphate for Al-Qaeda. And for the listeners, if you don't know what caliphate means, it means their capital. And this is an embarrassment to the U.S. military that we allowed this to happen in 2005. Al-Qaeda actually owned Ramadi, and Ramadi is the 3rd largest city in Iraq, located in Al Anbar province, which is the westernmost province. So you guys find out you're going to Ramadi. What are the general feelings at that point? Is it excitement? Is it trepidation? What are you guys feeling?
So, I was completely excited. So backing up a little bit, we did a RIP at SEAL Team 3 in, the 04 time period after we did the initial invasion. That was our first platoon. We did a RIP, so I had went and done a couple of schools that, gave me a couple of skill sets, and I spent some time with a 4-man element out in the Philippines doing some things. And we left from there, showed up in Baghdad, did a couple of weeks worth of ops, and then it came down to, hey, we're pushing out to Habaniya, as a task unit with most of our folks. But we've got this opportunity to send a handful of guys out to actually shark base. So unbeknownst to us, what's written in a few of the books is actually wrong. SEAL Team 3 and elements from RSOF and a couple of East Coast snipers, we went out and did some of the intelligence-based stuff out in Ramadi. We actually took over Shark Base, which is what's now Camp Mark Lee, from an Army element, and started that. Well, I was the dead LPO for that element, and I was charged by, a great friend of mine, Jason, basically charged with, hey, there's 3 Army and Marine Corps elements that are working in and around Ramadi. We're doing this stuff over here, but we got all these snipers and breachers and operators sitting around. Go find some work. So that's what I did. I went and started knocking on doors and eventually found the right people. And at the time, we were a small element by current standards. And so, we would do operations in and around Ramadi in 05. So I actually had my first 2 sniper engagements on that deployment in 05. And that's a whole another story as far as like what the reaction was by some of the senior leadership above. But that set the tone for coming, because that was pretty much towards the end of deployment as we were doing these things. And so that pretty much set my tone for what to expect next go around. And amazingly enough, we all got together and TU Bruiser was formed, and, it is what it was. And so when we got the call that we're going back to Ramadi, it was like, oh, I'm coming home. This is, and it was exploded at that point 10 times worse than what it was. But I had a taste of it. I had a taste of it in 05 and had a taste of, really getting after it at the tail end of our deployment in 05. So getting geared up or ramped up to go back out in 06, I was more than excited to get back to home.
For myself, so we do these hellacious workups that a lot of times are harder than the actual deployments themselves. So we've got 2 in our back pocket already, 2 deployments, 2 workups, and then we get the word that we're going to Ramadi. So at this point, we're like, hell yes, it's our time. Like, we've put in the hard work, we put in the effort. It's our time to go to war. This is what we've been training for. It's our time. We were super ecstatic. We were excited. We were hungry. We wanted it. And like I say, we were ready. We did that year-long workup, and it was hard work to get ready for it, but we trained specifically more towards the things that we knew that we'd need for that deployment. So a lot of the maritime stuff went out the window. It was more of the land-based stuff. It was more of the urban environment stuff. So we absolutely 100% thought we were ready for it. And then we get there, and I think we were ready, but we weren't that ready.
There was missing elements from that workup, as you said earlier, Mike. Normally we do an 18-month workup, and it's broken up into sections ahead of the deployment. That first 6 to 8 months is really when, and I might circle back to this later, it's when you really get the opportunity to gel as a platoon. And to get to know the new guys who are coming in and morph them into, where we did. And of course we got there. Every SEAL platoon before they deploy eventually does. But I had been sidebarred, chosen to go do another mission to support a cross-functional team. And that kept me away from the platoon for the majority of that compressed timeline, that 1 year. So, one of the things that always haunts me when people ask about Mikey particularly was that the greatest time that we shared together was literally earlier in the day, 2 hours laying beside each other looking through my sniper loophole because, we were talking. And it was really one of the, first times that we actually said and talked. And for me as the LPO, that was a huge leadership lesson learned, and something that haunts me now.
You get to Ramadi, you're excited, and then reality slaps you in the freaking face. And I'm sure the reality set in early in deployment when Cowie was shot through the leg. That, this is as real as it comes. Talk to me about the early months of Ramadi and what was going through your head.
War is new to us. It's not a workup anymore. Like, there's actually live rounds being thrown back at you. Like, you're in contacts. And I would say, 75% of the time we went out, we were getting shot at. Specifically to Cowie's mission. I was the fire team leader on that, and I went out with him. And Mikey was on that mission with me. And it was kind of any other day as far as setup. So, we leave early in the morning, get set up middle of the night. Just our little element, a couple Iraqi Jundies go with us. And the plan is that once the rest of our squad kind of gets up to our position, that we kind of break down and we kind of absorb back into them like we were never kind of there. But yeah, once Cowie got shot, reality really set in. We fought back to his position, ended up dragging his wounded body back behind little 3-foot coverage. Still getting, shot at, felt helpless because you're out in the middle of the urban environment with really no support at that time until you can get a little bit of suppressive fire and fight back until you can actually free up a moment to get some radio communications out to get either a Humvee or a Bradley up to your position. So you're vulnerable. You're there defending yourself for a while.
Was that the first time that you fired your weapon? Because you had 2 previous combat deployments. You're in a combat zone, but was that the first time you truly started firing your weapon?
Let me think. As far as day-to-day firing, yes. Like I say, I went through sniper school as a brand new guy, so I got to use that skill set, earlier in a couple other deployments. But as far as throwing sustained combat, this was the first time.
And it was sustained. What was the? I try to just put all this behind us, but the enemy TTP was you would enter, and of course, I want you guys to talk about the 1st of 506 and the fact that we were stationed on the east side of Ramadi at Camp Corregidor. They would see Americans coming in to the western side of Ramadi. Within 5 minutes, they're communicating. 10 minutes, they're maneuvering, and by 15 minutes, they're throwing lead your direction. And it seemed like that was pretty consistent, that the second you entered, you knew you were going to be in contact within 15 minutes. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that was, we often talk about those times, and of course, when you're slinging lead and doing what we were doing on a day-to-day basis, I mean, it's, I don't know how to describe that feeling other than, the sports analogy I give is it's like training your whole life to go to the Super Bowl. And if you never get that opportunity, what that would feel like versus, oh, we're in the Super Bowl right now. And it was what, 90% plus every time we went out. I mean, lead was being slung. And for these guys, to go back to your earlier question, I mean, for me, it was a horrible first couple of months of deployment because I was a platoon LPO, initial big leadership position, in our community. And because I had gotten loaned out for this direct support mission, I will say the first time and probably only time in my career that I really didn't give that job what it deserved, because I was 100 yards down the alley from SEAL Team 3 Charlie, which was my first 2 platoons, and then I moved over to Delta Platoon for our Ramadi 06 deployment. So for me, listening to the radio and then reading the AARs and watching these guys and knowing that they had migrated out to the east side of Ramadi, Charlie Platoon was on the west side of Ramadi, we kind of meet in the middle on some operations. Sitting there listening and not being able to participate, I mean, it was killing me. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I walked into, Jocko and the TU senior chief's office and just was whining and crying and like, you got to get me out of this, and eventually, I did get relieved, and that's when you and I left together and rejoined Delta, at Corregidor. Because again, going back to 05, I had a taste. 06 was happening without, me being involved, as far as I was concerned. So getting out to Corregidor and rejoining these guys was, the only thing I cared about at the time. And,
which was July timeframe. I remember.
Yeah, because the first couple of months we were light because I know you were tasked out. I know our platoon chief was tasked out training the Iraqi Jundies. I want to say our AOIC was tasked out doing something as well. So like we were kind of a squad element that was attached to the 506. So like we were really small, but yet still getting after it. Like, so it felt good once we actually got the full platoon back together. Like, cause we actually had the manpower, the firepower to actually handle some of these things that we were being hit with. So
I think it was Rumsfeld that said, you go to war with the army you have, not the army you wish you would have. And how often in war you don't have your whole element and you're just tasked, hey, get the mission done. And much like a business startup, you find a way. You become resourceful and you find a way. And you guys, when you became a platoon size again, when Doug and I came out there and we were in charge of the second squad, and Doug I loved, because the second squad was not as effective, and then you and I came in and their effectiveness came up. I was wildly proud of that. And that was because we led and we just created a little more cohesion amongst those guys. But talk to me about the relationship with the first of the 506, the Band of Brothers. Because in all my deployments, I've never seen a level of joint camaraderie as that you guys built through the way you conducted yourselves on a day-to-day basis, with professionalism and respect to all their soldiers right down to the private level. Talked about the little things you did, from haircuts to wearing their uniforms, and what you did to build a relationship to the point where the battalion commander would bestow the first of the 506 patch on your shoulders and ask you to wear that into combat as part of the first of the 506.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how it kind of started, or if like there was ever any guidance put out like, hey, we're going to do this. I think it just kind of happened. We absolutely like took them in, they took us in, because we lived within their FOB or their base. So like, but like everything we needed, we relied on them for. So like, they ran our chow hall, they were doing our laundry. Like we absolutely had to, and there was no reason not to. Like we had the utmost respect for those guys, because they're out there dealing with the same things we were. They're getting into contacts, they're getting into firefights, they're losing people. So we kind of felt like we owed it to them just to be like an added asset to them, like just to be them. And we felt like if we get the haircuts like them, so we got the Army haircuts, we got rid of the team guy mentality of sideburns and long hair. We started wearing their uniforms. One, because if our uniforms got holes in them, to try to get a turnaround of supply is not going to happen, but we're on an Army, FOB, like there's plenty of Army uniforms, so it just made it easy. Two, it made it easy out on the battlefield, because now we kind of blend in with the Army, so now we're not standing out, so we're not looking special out on the battlefield. Let's see what else. Like, the first of the 506 commander, he actually re-enlisted me right there in Camp Corregidor. That was pretty much an honor. I actually saw him not too long ago. He was the
25th ID
out in Hawaii. Yeah, he was the base general for the Army Bubba's out in Hawaii. Saw him on the airplane. That was awesome. Yeah, he still calls me Benny Oleson.
Well, and we can say his name. It is now Lieutenant General Ron Clark.
Yep. Okay.
He's within one of my top 5 leaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I still think he should have been the first black president.
Yeah.
Hey, he's going to be the second black president. That man has a way with people. And, most, for the listeners, I know I'm preaching to you guys, you already know this, most conventional forces don't have a good taste in their mouth for special operations. Now, that's because of special operations. And usually the MO is to have long hair, be really arrogant, and treat everyone else with disrespect because you think in your mind that you're better. But that quickly changes on the battlefield. It was a few times that we extracted on our own. It seems like almost every single time we were troops in contact and we had to pick up that radio telephone, say, Army, this is Navy. We are troops in contact. We are pinned down. We need your help. And they would come in those Bradleys. They would come in those Humvees. And if it wasn't for them, a lot of us wouldn't have come back.
100%. Yeah, I would like to say, I know the focus is on Ramadi 06, but some of those relationships and things that we just talked about, you started in Ramadi in 05. Building those relationships, building those bridges, getting out there with our Army and Marine Corps counterparts. And part of that, honestly, everyone has their favorite SEAL team, whoever you get assigned to and you grew up with, your formative years, as we like to call them. But I think SEAL Team 3 really had a niche in that market because we were able to, do the beach bum volleyball thing, but we were also ready, willing, and able at the right time and right place with the right people to cut the hair, put the uniform on, starch, military bearing and all the things that SOF traditionally is not known for. I think we bridged that gap really well at Team 3. And I think continuing that legacy into 06, these guys going out there with the 1st of the 506 and building those initial relationships, I think that we were mature enough to see what they bring to the fight, and they were able to get past some of the traditional soft reputation and see what we could bring to the fight. So as a combined force, we were fairly unstoppable in Ramadi.
I think one of the things with special operations is you have to check your ego. Infantry wins wars, not special operations. We are a very specific strategic tool. I know Mikey was wildly proud to be part of the 1st of the 506. I know they called us their SEALs or their frogmen on the roof for the work that we did. And I know things got even, I don't know, is this a word? More real when Mark was killed and Ryan was wounded. Mark Lee being the first SEAL killed in Iraq, even though the SEALs were there from 2003 to 2006, running high-risk missions on a nightly basis. Mark was the first fatality, and I think that speaks to the violence of action going on in Ramadi. So hard-fought months. Guys are fatigued. I think that's fair to say. And the Army says, hey, we're going into the Malab district where we had operated before and gotten in some pretty bad firefights. And they said, hey, can you support us one last time? Talk about going into that mission, because I know one of the decisions was we were so close to redeploying and you have to palletize your equipment, which then those pallets have to be inspected and signed off. So we made the decision to go with half manning on that last mission. I know we'll talk about that in sort of the after action of what happened, but talk to me and for the audience again, Doug, Benny, myself, and Mikey were one of the 2 sniper overwatch positions going out. And of course we had, I can't remember, guys, was it 6 to 8 Iraqi scouts, soldiers with us?
Yeah, somewhere in there. I know we had 2 4-man SEAL elements supported by a couple of Iraqi scouts, giving us some sort of overwatch in our position and on the ground level. That was, I know everyone thinks in the military, and I've had to overcome this in the corporate world, that it's military. So you just say it and it gets done. We know, especially in the soft community, it doesn't work that way. Going into that last time frame, the last couple of operations, because we actually went out on one right before that because it was the 27th of September, which was my birthday. And I actually have a picture of me and you holding American flag up on the rooftop, me and Benny. So there was a lot of debate going into those last couple of weeks and a lot of strife within the leadership, because as far as, for all intents and purposes, we were done. for the aforementioned reasons about palletization and, checking all the serial numbers and everything else. But, and for me, as a leader, I mean, that was one of my most difficult positions and perspectives, and something I've never talked about before was because I was very adamant
about not going out.
No. I was very adamant that we should go out.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I distinctly remember the conversation in the hooch with all the guys, and like, look, these guys are going out with or without us, and we've been operating with them, and we owe it to them, we owe it to ourselves. Finish this out strong and take that last opportunity to support the mission, support the initiative. And so, that's when you talk about carrying a weight of guilt. I mean, obviously, I was platoon LPO, and that was my drive. I mean, it was a volunteer. I mean, it came down literally to, okay, we need this many people. Yep. Who wants to volunteer to stay? And it went around the room. And we got our 8 SEAL volunteers. Not that the other guys weren't interested, but I mean, it literally came down to, we need 8 guys. We're going to do these last couple of missions, 27th and 29th. So yeah, difficult time. And, but our guys volunteered and we got geared up, and, and as you said, after Mark Lee was killed, it was even though everyone was dog tired and it was the end of, a long, hard fought time frame, that was kind of relit everyone's fire, so to speak, to continue.
It was after Mark who was killed that I actually wrote the your letter, whatever we call that, the letter to your family, if the worst happens. A good point here, because it's going to lead into the story, is we had good intent, Doug, Benny. I don't think for us it was a question whether we go on that last mission or not. Like, the answer was, yeah.
Absolutely.
Where do I need to be and with what? But we started to make a lot of planning errors with good intent. And what do they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I ended up making this mistake during the Battle of Solder City on the very first mission again. But you guys remember, we sent the corpsman home probably 2 weeks prior to that. And the corpsman is responsible and has legal authority over the morphine that is issued to all of us that we carried. And because he was going home and his name was signed for that, he had to collect that back from us. And we didn't give it I don't want to say, hey, we're like, hey, this doesn't make sense, but we can't hold on to it because he's legally responsible for it. And we didn't give it a second thought. Talk to me about insert, setting up, and that day.
Just one comment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misconceptions. And then there's a lot of armchair quarterbacking that we've all seen. And, the only message I would like to say on that is military is no different than any other environment. It's no different than any other corporation, company, or whatnot. 10% of your people do 9% of your work. 9% of your people is what you spend your time dealing with. So call it fog of war, call it planning, call it lack of communication, coordination, whatever. All these elements are things that we deal with, period. That being one of them. It's a great example of, the mission's going to go on. And that's the mindset that we had as the task unit and as a platoon. It didn't matter. We were there. We were in the fight. We were in the thick of it. And, we were going to make it happen one way or the other, same as we do in any other, company in life. I mean, we make it happen when it needs to happen, especially when you're dealing with, soft guys, so.
Benny, talk to me about that mission in inserting and setting up on the rooftop of that prominent building.
So as far as the planning goes, I think this is kind of where we probably got a little bit complacent in our planning, because we typically did the same thing. We did what worked. So we picked out 2 mutually supporting rooftops that overlooked each other's front doorways. So like I say, they were mutually supporting each other. But it was on the southern side of, I think, Cop Eagle. So that was kind of the mindset was to protect Cop Eagle, because they were still doing some T-barrier set up or something. But we picked the southern side, which is, I think was Al Farouk, which is an area that we really hadn't been down into yet. So it was still kind of new to us, but it was still probably the most dangerous in the Malab district. So, but I think we picked probably the best looking buildings with the imagery that we had. Maybe once we got set up, we probably could have looked at something a little different, but I felt like the buildings we took were pretty good.
They were the prominent buildings.
Yeah.
I don't think there were any better selections. And we did do one mission in the Marab district previous to that. We'd actually, I think, not that counts kill or matter, but I think we racked up something like 14 kills on that operation. Yeah. So it was a bad area.
I do remember as part of the planning, considerations was we were told that's a bad area to go and set up on those houses. But what it afforded us was those mutually supporting positions, watching each other's front doors.
And then also those really advantageous fields of fire too, like
yes.
The accesses for the snipers. So
yeah, I mean we had multiples that day before the event happened, but it was hey, I would not go to that particular street where you guys are looking at because we can't get there, which is why we had to exfil out through
the back
another set of structures.
One of the most dangerous things, and you talked about complacency, is we like victory can be a dangerous thing. Growth can be a dangerous thing. Is we were highly successful. And it's not like we weren't looking at our procedures. We were doing after-action reviews. And some of those after-action reviews, after a mission where we're tired, having spent 48 hours in 130-degree heat, I mean, we took 1 hour after actions to say, hey, are we taking the right things? Do we need to adjust? But we were meeting with such a level of success. We're like, hey, let's just do more of it.
Well, then one element that I think is missed, and again, it's common misconception, a year or two later, one of the folks that was speaking to me, one of the docs at Bud's, a great guy, he asked me, hey, we're not talking about that day anymore. Tell me about something else. Well, what else do you want to talk about, right? I mean, that's kind of the attitude. Didn't want to be there in the first place. But one of the things that I did bring up as a story was when you and I think it was on my birthday on the 27th, and the three of us were in this, rooftop together. And we had a small set of, loopholes that we were looking through, and that vehicle pulled in. And a shot rang out and narrowly missed, basically hit the lip of the wall that we were laying down prone behind, missing our sniper holes. And we think it came from the trunk of that vehicle, and then it took off and disappeared. And he's like, oh, great, that's a great story. What did you do? I'm like, well, Benny and I looked at each other, kind of laughed, rolled out of the way, looked at each other, rolled back, and got back on the gun. He's like, that's not a normal reaction to getting shot at. I'm like, yeah, it was. But for us, having been in it, in the thick of it, day after day after day, you talk about complacency. I don't want to say we were complacent in our planning or strategy, but it literally became the norm to go out, expect to get into a firefight, sling some lead, put some pressure and or impacts on the enemy, and then go home. I mean, that's what we were living for a while.
So last mission, you guys insert like all the rest. September 28th, probably around 11 p.m. if I can remember. You leave, again, what was the Cop Eagle, and patrol out of Cop Eagle into the night. The elements split, each of the 4-man teams with their respective Iraqi scouts, and you assault or quietly take down the buildings, secure the families, and set up your sniper positions. Talk to me about the early mornings, because I know we were in contact pretty early as the first of the 506 actually came in to do a clearance op in that general area.
I mean, for me, the day, it has some fog to it, to be honest. I know that Mikey was watching the road and a row of houses to our backs. Myself, you, and Benny, we set up our sniper overwatch positions. There was kind of a Z dog leg in the construction of the building. So I believe Benny had a big open field and the front door of our supporting element
looking east
in his sights.
Yeah.
Yes, you and I were both looking in the same general direction, slightly different angles, which coincidentally enough later led to our position switch. I do remember engaging one enemy combatant earlier that day. I believe you did as well.
Yes.
So, I mean, other than the first of the 506 doing clearance ops and us being in the area providing overwatch, I mean, it was kind of a somber day. I mean, it was traditional. It was hot. I mean, we had set up some shade structure material, some things over our positions, trying to provide a little relief from the heat. But it was kind of somber in the fact that it was really, other than those two initial engagements, it was quiet. And this was our token last mission. I mean, we were done at this point. And based on previous inserts and operations and subsequent exfills, we had done our engagements for the day. I mean, that was, we were all just kind of chatting. I mean, to be honest, I mean, that's, at one point Mike left the rear security because we also had a couple of the Iraqi support people up on the rooftop with us, and he came over and actually got on my gun and laid down in my sniper hole. And it's one of the things that I regret the most. It's always great leaders, I think, have the most self-reflection and continuously evaluate what we could have done differently. But on this particular day, that's probably the greatest amount of time I ever spent one-on-one with Mikey, was laying there next to him talking about the future and his next platoon and going home, etc. So that's a difficult memory to,
I do remember there was a sense of excitement because we were proud of what we did. We were proud of the relationships we built with the Army and the Marine Corps. And I remember, because those conversations were happening probably at a greater rate than most of our previous operations because of that excitement. But I remember talking with Mikey. He was excited because he was going to sniper school, if you remember that.
Yes.
And I remember talking to him about a girl he was dating, and giving him advice, which I was not equipped to give on relationships, like the worst person. But I do know for me, I was talking about going home to see my little girl who was 2 years old. And I was excited because it had been a long 7 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was only dating at the time, so and it was my high school sweetheart at the time, and now she's my wife. So and we got the 3 kids. So I owe that to Mikey. So yeah, like you say, it was kind of a quiet morning other than the couple engagements you guys had. But I do want to bring in the fact that this was I want to say the first time that Jamil got his first sniper kill as well, and he was part of the other element. And I just remember how excited he was. So and that he was one of our Iraqi Jundis that was with us, and the fact that he got his first enemy KIA, he was all excited about. So,
and for the listeners, this is what we refer to as a partner force. We were not only tasked with training them to become an effective combat element, but they also partnered and accompanied us on missions. And we had a close relationship with these guys. 2 of them spoke almost perfect English, which is so rare. But we did consider them part of the team.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of conversations going on that day. Not to give away our position or anything. At that point, after our 2 engagements, it's kind of a TTP that we had, SOP. The gig's up. Everybody and their brother knows where we are. So, and we use that to our advantage on several previous operations with our, Overwatch or mutually supporting positions. But there was a lot of conversation going on because we were all excited. It was the end of the time, as you said. I mean, who's not excited at the end of a deployment to get home and see their family and see their kids? I mean, at the time, you guys remember I had 3 boys, all grown now. And so, getting off deployment meant I could get on a plane and head back to Georgia and see my kids. So there was a lot to talk about and be excited about.
the one thing that I think was different, or something that we saw was new, at least for the enemy TTP, was that they started setting up kind of blockade like trash, blocking off the avenue's approach to our position. So they're, like I say, kind of marking off our position, and I don't think we really ever seen this up to this point. In a way, I guess spider senses kind of kicked in, like knowing that something was probably coming, but it still didn't alarm us enough to like really put us on guard. Like, we were still on guard, or we were still on observing through our sniper overwatch position stuff. But this was something new that we saw.
But I think, given what we talked about earlier, the nature of, complacency is the wrong word. I mean, that's an element for sure. But you tend to write out the scene in your head based on prior experience. And at that point, we had a lot. What was our T responsible for? Big numbers, unprecedented in modern times. But it was only a week or two prior that actually we were together and you were spotting with one of our scopes a guy hiding around a corner. And leading up to the chain of events, we received an incoming explosion. And all I could remember in my head was thinking, once you and I had switched positions, basically. You were on comms, I moved into your position, had a quite slightly wider field of view. And it was sitting, and it was over like a barrel or something that we had found versus the prone position next to it that I was in previously. And we received that first explosion, and all I could think in my head was that somebody launched an RPG at us from down the block. So that was what we were looking for, and actually is why Mikey moved from his secured position and came in and put himself in between you and I. And next to Benny, because we were all at that point basically huddled together, which in retrospect probably not the best operational TTP, but we were together for a reason, for the Overwatch and for where the holes were, that we had to look through.
And that call made sense. I remember we pulled Mikey back because we're like, hey, that position is no longer safe.
Right, because he was out by himself on the other end of the building.
For the audience, now, the reason we were remaining in place, remaining over day, as we call it, is that we were waiting for night to come. And once night had fallen, we were going to extract under the cover of darkness, which just is tactically smart. It's smarter than trying to extract a building during the day. So we wanted to use technology to our advantage plus nightfall.
Especially with what Benny said, that, we noticed a change in the enemy TTPs. So, we brought it in, tight 360 basically, and we're, as you said, waiting for night to fall.
So now, Benny, you're, Doug, Mikey, and I are within 3 feet of one another. You're probably 6 to 8 feet away from us, looking the other direction. I remember, Doug, you're faced the same way as Mikey towards that road, and I'm facing the opposite direction, sort of in the Indian position. And I'm in and out of sleep because, again, it's 115 to 130 heat index. It's midday. We've had body armor. We had made a call. Hey, guys, if you need to take your body armor off from time to time to cool off, then that's what you need to do. It's big boys rules. You know the deal. You make the call. Were you falling in and out of sleep, or were you wide awake at that time?
Oh, definitely. It was, for all the reasons you already said, but I remember Mikey joining us and getting on one of the sniper scopes, sitting between the two of us. So we were literally sitting, on some whatever junk, rubbing elbows, and you were directly to his left, Benny right behind us. When the initial explosion came in, before Mikey came and joined us, I thought I, indeed into the wall. But then we realized that's not the case. All right, what just happened? Game on. I remember Mikey coming over like, this is, we're going to find where this guy just launched that at us, and we're going to find him. He was angry. We're all angry. How dare you shoot at us? So we were looking for where that initial action had come from. We assumed, again, like I said, I think we even called it in as we think they might have shot an RPG at the building. Subsequently, I think we all believe that it was the first attempt at getting a grenade up on the roof.
I'm glad that you guys bring that up, the falling in and out of sleep, because that's something that eats at me. Because I know I was, and it's part that haunts me. Like, did part of me fall asleep at the wrong time, when this event happened? So it brings me comfort knowing that it also affected you guys. So,
as you guys are listening to this, Benny, Doug, and I have never sat down and had this conversation. And we'll get to that. We should have. And part of our senior leadership should have forced us to do that. I think it would have helped us deal with the trauma a little better had we talked through it immediately after it happened. So we get hit with an RPG, and then a little after that, it happens. And the grenade came over the lip of the wall. And remember, we're on a 3-story building. This was one hell of a throw from whatever position the guy threw the grenade. But it barely came over the lip of the wall. And Mikey, who was sitting in that seat, it hit him on the chest and dropped right between Doug, myself, and Mikey. Now, Doug, were you startled when that happened?
So I was on my rifle, and so it came over just to my right because that's where Mikey was sitting, and I remember either actually or through the fog, I remember, I have in my head an image of what that grenade looked like. I think what happened was, looking back at the imagery after the fact, years later, I think that someone got up on the roof next door, and the folks that we had with us on the rooftop, the 2 supporting guys, just didn't see it, and we were obviously focused looking in our direction in our sniper holes, and I think that first explosion was them attempting to get one on top of us, and it landed at the base of the building, and this second one made its way across. So, yeah, it bounced off Mike's chest, landed basically at his feet. We're all rubbing elbows, basically. And Mikey obviously covered the blast. The most amazing thing out of that was, as we've talked about before, and it may or may not be in the citation, he was the only one that had a clear path to, jump out of the way if he wanted to.
He probably would have taken shrapnel to the legs.
Yeah, he probably would, yourself. He would definitely probably felt some of the blast, but because of the way the holes were set up, the sniper loopholes, and the way the structures and the materials and the tables and everything that we had set up in order to be in the key positions we were in, he was on the edge of an opening and was the only one that had free access to
that 2 or 3 foot drop off lip of the building.
Yeah. So,
there is fog. There's major fog. And sometimes I can just hear the repeat of that boom, boom, the thing going off. And I think the only thing I remember is I sat there and just watched it happen with a dumb look on my face in total amazement. Because a testament to him, he didn't hesitate. And as it went off, he covered the majority of the blast, but it's not like the movies. When he covered the blast, he absorbed the most of the impact, but it also created a funnel to his left and right, directly in Doug and my position. And I know Doug and I had very close wounds, except you'd also broken a arm. Is that correct?
Yeah, just, bilat frag through both legs, and then a piece went through the leg. So technically a break, but.
So Doug and I both had close to anywhere from 20 to 30 holes in the legs. And I don't know about you, Doug, but it sort of flipped me over because I probably was moving the direction away from the grenade, and the concussion sort of flipped me over onto my face and on my chest. and all I felt was a pain I've never felt before. Whatever people say about getting shot and not feeling it, I felt this.
Yeah, so I was up against that, as we described, the Z in the wall, basically, the architecture of the building. Mike and I were situated on a short section that formed the middle of that Z. So the blast, that I absorbed, that bypassed or Mikey, or went through Mikey, it bounced me off the wall. That explosion you could feel, and from there things get a little foggy from that concussion. I do remember my first recollection, and again, how much of it after the explosion is real or imagined, I don't honestly know 100%. But my recollection was once you kind of shake off some of the what just happened. I remember distinctly Benny rendering aid. I remember you on the radio, and I remember eventually the Jundies that were with us coming back up, but without their weapons. And so I believe myself to have tried to instruct them on how to take the safeties off of our weapons to help Benny at that point return fire. And you could hear the ensuing battle that later, actually not too long ago, I just found out was our guys. That's kind of how much we avoid talking about this, was our guys had to, troops in contact had to fight to get to our position, to come to our aid. Big, huge firefight happened. That was the kickoff. So
I know the concussion of the grenade had shut my emitter off my radio. And still, I wasn't prepared to look at my legs. I didn't know if I had legs because of the pain. And I tried to get up and walk over because my radio was shut off, but I knew that Muhammad had the Motorola on him. And so I crawled over to him, got that Motorola, and that's actually the radio I was using because I knew Seth, who was in charge of the other rooftop, had Iraqis that had the Motorolas.
Over to Jamil, I think.
Yeah, and to show how off I was, I think I said Mayday over the radio. I said, troops in contact, we need help now. This is our position. And I put an all hands Mayday call on the radio. But I do remember you and I got back to Mikey, and I remember we're touching his chest and saying, hey, hold on, man, hold on. And there's not much you can patch up when somebody jumps on a grenade. But I do remember this. I remember watching you fire his Mark 48, and I've never seen, up to that point, as much as I knew, I've never seen a look on your face of such
rage.
Yeah.
So my perspective, like I say, I was laying prone behind Mikey, so the blast, when it went out, obviously the side blast went out and hit you too, and then what went between his legs is what gave me shrapnel in my calves. All I remember is hearing the word grenade. I heard the blast, and then when I woke back up, I think I was only out for a few seconds, is I woke back up to utter chaos. Grown men screaming, moaning, just a scene that, I would like to forget, but obviously I never will. I remember dragging Mikey to a position more into the center of the rooftop just to get away from the lip of the rooftop, just to be able to, in case another grenade came up onto the rooftop, or I had no idea what was next. Like I say, I know that we were in the middle of a firefight because there's rounds going off and the whole communication to the other squad trying to get over to us. But Mikey, doing just a quick assessment that I could, seeing Doug. Mikey's got labored breathing. He's got, blood coming out of everything. There's small air bubbles, coming from everything. So the little bit of the medical equipment that we had on us, because we didn't have the medic with us, is our little blowout kit. So I'm breaking his open. I'm breaking mine open. The Asterman chest seals aren't sticking anything because there's so much blood everywhere. The gauze, I'm trying to wrap up and stuff into everything I could. It's not working. I felt like every medical thing that we ever been taught up to that point just wasn't working. So after, I did as much as I could with him for, that moment. I think after the radio communication got out to get the other guys over to us, because we were in the middle of that firefight, I felt, like I say, vulnerable. I felt scared. I felt just alone. And then rage took over. I remember picking up Mikey's 48, and the best thing that I felt at that time was, what can I do to help get support to me? And that was to pick up his gun and help provide suppressive fire to get our other element over, because like I said, I felt alone, because you guys, all three of you, were majorly wounded, and I took the least of it. So I was the last one that ever shot his 48. And his 48's still in Team 3, and every time I'd go back to Team 3, it's in the display case, and it's a constant reminder of that event too. So it was hard going back to Team 3, but
there is a major sense of guilt that, Doug, I don't know how you feel, that we couldn't find a way to stand on our own 2 feet and pick up our guns and hold the line until help. And you talk about feeling helplessness. Doug and I are lying next to Mikey, watching the firefight go on.
Yeah, it was completely helpless feeling. I mean, for the first time, we were out of the fight when we needed to be in the fight.
So as the element fought its way to us, one time totally distorted, it seemed like forever. I know we're in pain. We don't have morphine. It probably, in reality, was only 5 minutes. But I remember they run up to the rooftop, and somebody had already called for a Bradley to come on Farouk, the backside of us. And I remember 2 guys picked me up, like, sort of my arms around their shoulders. And they're like, hey, how do we get to the alley? And I remember we're leading them down. You're behind me. And then let's just say Jay was tasked with carrying Mikey. And Jay is one of the physical phenomena. He's a physical freak. And the Bradley's waiting. They throw Doug and I in there. And then Jay lays Mikey down into the back of the Bradley and jumps in with us. And I remember, again, we're looking at Mikey. It's almost like just staring at what you had caused. And Jay was physically exhausted. And I felt bad. I sort of had to yell at him. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Hey, start chest compressions on him. And he sort of snapped to. And we've talked about that. And he said, hey, thanks for snapping me out of it. I'm like, bro, I'm sorry. I yelled at you. But it seemed like that ride to the Corregidor aid station seemed like 30 minutes, man.
Yeah, I remember, it's funny, it was, I had broken out, whatever. I remember watching what Benny just described. And again, feeling like there's something we could or should be doing, but couldn't. I remember Seth, who's no longer with us, stopping at me and assessing the situation. I remember, a guy, we'll call him DV, dropped an additional tourniquet on my stomach and, to put on me. And then I remember us getting, packaged up the best we could, getting ready to exfil, and trying to stand up. Once I was lifted, trying to bear weight, couldn't. And for the first time, there was a moment of humor in a very tragic situation, because I remember thinking, Seth literally carried me down the stairs and out the back to the Bradley. And remember thinking, oh yeah, this is payback for when I had to carry you like 1,000 yards out of the Nyland during one of our training events, gear and all. So I'm like, yeah, this is comical. But But yeah, I remember getting into the Bradley, wondering where Benny was, quite honestly, and then quickly realizing there's only 4 guys left out there because there's 4 of us in the Bradley, so we swapped a person. And then, that was probably the longest ride of my life back to, being there next to Mikey for that ride.
And Benny, you had to go back up on that rooftop, get all the serialized equipment, get our weapons, then go back to the other rooftop that the guys were on, get that equipment, and then extract.
Yeah, so to back up just a little bit, trying to get Mikey off the rooftop, I was helping Jay, and to carry essentially dead weight, and Mikey wasn't a small person, and just being covered in blood, he's slick. It was hard because the stairwell that went up to the rooftop wasn't that wide, so like just trying to move his body down. Like say you talk about Jay being exhausted, like I remember just being absolutely just wiped. But yeah, loading. I was there, loading all 3 of you guys up in the back of the Bradley, and once you watch the ramp go up, you're like, I don't know when's the next time I'm going to see you guys. But yeah, so. Ramp goes up and I'm still there. I have to immediately, like you say, kind of compartmentalize that incident is done. Now I'm still in the thick of the operation or the fight. So we were forced to kind of go back up to the rooftop and get all of our sensitive gear. Obviously, weapon systems are still up there, communication systems, backpacks, rucksacks, all that kind of stuff. So, and what hits me when we get back up to the rooftop is obviously with it still being, that heat index of well over 100 degrees, whatever is, where there was this huge puddle of blood is now like this red paste of because it's so hot, it's drying up so fast. But then there's also the reminders of all the medical gauzes and all the 7.62 rounds, the casings that are up there. So all this, the scene itself, and what kind of hits me is like, if you kind of think about it, all that stuff was kind of put there because of me. So I felt like that scene, it's like another, it's a reminder, like it kind of just eats at me. Like a lot of that stuff that was left on the rooftop was put there because of me. Yeah, we pack everything up, get that rooftop, everything off there, and then we had to basically go back to the other rooftop where Seth's Overwatch was at and get all the stuff that they had left as well. And then once we got all their stuff, we went back to Cop Eagle's Nest, and then that's where we actually finally got to the point where like you're able to take a breath, and that's when I actually started to take all my equipment off, and that's when I actually finally realized that I was hit as well. I took my pants off and realized I had been hitting the calves as well. But the adrenaline was so high, I just never realized it until we got back to the Eagle's Nest.
I don't think I told you guys this, but on our deployment in 2008, we went to Sadr City, and then I had to go back to Ramadi. And 2 nights before we rotated out in 2008, I asked RTU Commander Jack if he would put the guys at risk if I could go back to that rooftop. Remember, Ramadi's almost absolutely secure at this point. There was nothing going on. But again, we had to take volunteers, and the guy said absolutely, and I went back to the rooftop in 2008. The chair you were sitting in was still there. Ear cups from our Peltor headsets, casings, flex cuffs, water bottles. Al-Qaeda had come in days after that incident and had kicked the family out. And where our loopholes were, they had knocked down those walls so snipers could never use them again. But it was surreal to go back to that rooftop. And the guys gave me a moment alone up there. So one thing you didn't see, Benny, which was a testament to the relationship that all the guys had built, is it seemed like all of the first of the 506 was on the other side of the road where the cop was, waiting for us as that Bradley came in, and they put Doug and I and Mikey on stretchers. And I remember specifically, Ron Clark and Dave Womack there. And they get us into the aid station. I remember getting the first shot of morphine, and I looked at the Army soldier, the medical technician. I'm like, hey, and again, like, you say some dumb things in times of dire times, and I didn't feel the morphine from the initial shot. And I looked at him and I grabbed him by his lapel, and I'm like, hey, I'm a SEAL. You need to ramp that shit up. And he you saw this look of annoyance, and he gave me another shot, and that's when it kicked in.
I remember getting, once we were offloaded, getting into treatment. Of course, it's a flurry of memories and fog, but getting everything cut off, and they're doing their, head-to-toe examinations on us, and you and I are laying in bed side by side because we were, for those brief moments, and I don't know how long it was for, thinking, man, we were coking and joking to the point that some of the staff actually started laughing with us. We're sitting there, blowed up for all intents and purposes, and coking and joking about what they're doing, about what they're about to do, what procedure they're about to do on us, because we're high on morphine, right? I mean, so until I overheard someone, say, and, at that moment, I think you and I both probably had a moment of clarity and, got the word. And I remember them, as they packaged us up, getting ready to move, we asked, or someone offered, you may have asked, I don't remember, for a moment, and they gave us that.
I remember moving outside. Of course, we're strapped down to the gurney. They can't do surgery. It's an aid station. They need to get Doug and I to Habania, where there's a surgical capability as quickly as possible. But I remember Dave Womack took the Oakleys off his face and put them on me because we're directly in the sun. And I remember Ron Clark with Mikey, and the CH-47 comes in and we go off. As we got to Habania, they needed to get us into surgery rapidly. But since they knew we weren't in as much pain with morphine, and Doug, I don't know if you remember this, they wanted to give us 3 to 5 minutes with Mikey's body, which was, at the time, I didn't appreciate it because it felt like rubbing a dog's nose in the mess that they had just created. Like, you did this. But I again, they had the best intent, but I remember.
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult. And yeah, there's an extreme sense of guilt.
And a part of me wishes I could have that.
I remember talking with Doug because then after that surgery, we went to Balad, and then they prepared us to go to Germany where we had additional surgeries. And I felt so grateful to have Doug with me. I think misery loves company in a sense. And I remember we talked about you. We're like, I bet he wished he could be with us right now because you probably felt alone, even though you were surrounded by all the guys in the platoon.
Yeah, I definitely wish I was with you guys. Yeah, like I had the brothers, everybody from the platoon, but felt, in a sense, kind of removed. Like, I felt like they didn't quite experience, what I had gone through. So to be able to like try to grieve and to reflect on what happened with people that weren't there during that moment, I think made it more difficult, at least for myself. So yeah, I wish definitely I could have been with you guys, but
I do remember in Germany, we had a lot of visitors. I mean, and stuff. Even when we got to Habania, the task unit there led by Rob was all there. I mean, that brotherhood wraps their arms around you, and they do what they can to console you as best as possible. But Doug and I had a bad nurse. Do you remember this? She was older, and she was just sort of rude, and so we got testy with her. And they'd always ask, how much pain are you in? Of course, the answer was going to be 10 because I want the morphine. And she was rude to us, and we gave a rude answer, and she injected the morphine quickly. And you and I got like severe nausea to the point of like we wanted to throw up. And I remember we were laughing.
I remember one of our visitors, he was talking to you at the time, another officer, and I remember it may have been the same testy nurse, because there's actually a note in my chart that I looked at years later about that incident where they had done something. They were looking at me from waist up, but some guy or nurse had came over and dropped like a clipboard on my feet, and I went off on him for, like, got injuries down here, brother.
Yeah.
And so, you were kind of giving me the, hey man, there's a visiting important VIP officer here. And I'm like, hey, so that was funny. And then, you talk about the community and the brotherhood and the way we support each other. I think that is definitely an element that we have that possibly no one else in the military has. I mean, we went to Habanea. One of our old platoon mates was there and actually helped with the initial surgery. They assigned 2 guys out of there, 1 team guy each, to basically go with us 24/7 until we got back, home. And then when we got to Germany, of course, we have elements from the East Coast that was there, and one of my best friends to this day, Shawnee, showed up in the middle of the night
with his platoon.
And was basically guys that we had went to buds with and guys that were deployed to Germany at the time. He came in and was arguing with the nurse in the hallway that it's past visiting hours, and he's like, yeah, that's not gonna sit well. So he came on in the room and he's visiting us, bringing us beers and magazines, and I remember he brought me an airsoft, one of those little plastic airsoft pistols to, he's like, anybody starts pissing you off, just shoot them. So I mean, the community definitely wrapped themselves around us from the moment until to this day. But I think that's something that we do.
I do remember even Admiral McCraven came and saw us. He was in charge of SOCUR at the time, brought his wife, brought his son. I believe his wife's name is Roseanne. I'm getting that wrong. She had baked us brownies, but we could not eat a thing. And then from Germany, we go to Bethesda. We fly to San Diego and our families, and we get discharged pretty quickly there. We're both in wheelchairs. I know the integration back into my home. My daughter was scared. She was 2. She's 2. But the dude she saw leave did not look like the dude that came back in a wheelchair, and she wouldn't even come to me. And that reintegration was tough for me. And I know the dread, which I did not want to do, was we had to prepare to go to the funeral. And the dread was I did not want to look Mikey's family in the face and say we had failed, or even say I'm sorry, because that falls so freaking short of anything.
Yeah, I remember leaving Germany, and there was a problem with the loading ramp or something, and you and I threatened to unbuckle and get off the gurney and get up the stairs, because we weren't going to miss, in my mind, I wasn't going to miss the funeral. But, once we're back stateside, my kids were on the East Coast, so I didn't get to see them right away for several months, which, it's tough on its own, but a savior in some ways for what you just described. But ramping up, getting ready to speak at the funeral, being introduced to Mike's family, which, again, extremely difficult. I mean, how else do you describe it is other than what you said, which is you feel responsible 100%. But I will say the family was extremely welcoming and thoughtful, considerate of us.
And I remember you joined us. It was the first time we got to really see you. But what sticks is I'm building up the courage to talk to Mikey's mom, to meet the family. And I remember the 2 of us getting in the wheelchairs because we rode in the same car. I think you were in that car as well. Is you're getting ready, and she comes up, and we don't know what she looks like. And she comes up, and the first words out of her mouth, I don't know if you remember this, is, "I'm so glad you guys are okay." Whatever pre-planned thing I had said to say is gone. Testament to that family and the fact that they are so selfless and all they do is care about others is why Mikey was who Mikey was. That funeral was awful. What were your feelings going through that? I know I have my set of perceptions.
I know we kind of talked about it the other day or yesterday that one, like it felt like all eyes were on us. It just felt like the whole kind of community was looking at us. Like I say, the family I felt like was very open and glad that we were okay. But like how long it took for the tridents being pinned onto the coffin and that sound echoing through Rosecrans there, like it was I don't even know how to put a word to it.
It's hollow.
Yeah, hollow is a good word. Just that thumping sound, what felt like forever. And you know, you feel bad for the family because all you want to do is help close out their loss, and you know, I just felt like it carried on. It seemed like it was way too long, but.
I know we've talked about this and I know the answer, but I'll ask it anyways. Do you guys keep up with the family?
No.
I know you did intimately in the year after, and probably the few couple of years after Mikey's death. And I'm the same way. I don't keep up with the family. Just wanted to hear why that's so hard to do.
I mean, I think it's what we've already discussed. It's that guilt and responsibility and not wanting them to relive that every time they see us. Probably wrong to feel that way or to have not kept up with the family. Because every time I've seen them at the few events that I participated in over the years, the last time and one of the only times the three of us seen each other was the commissioning ceremony. It's big hugs and smiles and all around and that same welcoming,
You want to reclose that box because that box opens every time I see you guys. And then I'll see you in 5 years, reopen that box, and I want to close it as quickly as possible again.
Yeah, it's that reminder. I feel that whole, the guilt and the shame pops back up. Like I go to all, these big events, the christening, the commissioning, the Camp Monsoor, La Posta, dedication stuff. I go for the family, but at the same time, like you say, it opens that box back up, and the whole guilt and shame creeps back in, and it's just that reminder that it eats away at you. So in a way, it's just easier to keep that box closed.
I know for you guys as well as myself, some of your kids were born. All your kids were born. Your daughter was already here. My older sons were already here, but my youngest son Evan was born after, and he has this just connection to Mikey. And before him, what I would say, what we call him, a very close friend of mine and mentor. His family, we've always been close. Another team guy. His son did the same thing in Cub Scouts, and they would always go to Rosecrans and plant the flags. And when he was older, my son took over that charge, and it was, humbling moment when, your son that's never met Mike, has to ensure that, his gravesite is secured so that he can be the one to plant the flag.
I think that's partly why I had to get out of San Diego. Is I'm sure like you guys, I would go to Fort Rosecrans, which for the listeners is the military cemetery located very close to the SEAL teams on the West Coast. And I'd bring a new trident and I'd leave it on top of his tombstone every Sunday. And in fact, one of those Sundays, I remember I was going to get donuts for my daughter coming back from that. It was early Sunday morning. And I walked across the street and a cop gave me a ticket for jaywalking. I could not talk my way out of that one and got very, very heated. But I had to get out of San Diego. It was that constant reminder of that. I know one of the things, even though we pride ourselves on after action reviews, we never sat down and talked about that day other than writing whatever citations we had to write or witness statements for Mikey's Medal of Honor, which he was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor by President Bush.
Yeah, I remember being in the hospital and you and I
writing
to write it up.
That's a slam dunk. One that happens very rarely, but when somebody chooses to jump on a grenade, there are very few outcomes but death. And you're giving your life to save your brothers. Do you think had we sat down, if leadership had forced us to sit down and say, hey, let's talk through this, we're not looking to place blame, but there are some definite lessons learned that need to be passed to the next generation or to the SEAL teams deploying after you, do you think that would help with the overall healing from that trauma?
I don't know that it would help the overall healing per se. It's been 15 years and it's the first time the three of us are literally in a room together talking through the event. It should have happened. But like we talked about earlier before before we started recording, I think in a way our community operating at the level we do on the 2-year cycle that we operate on, the greatest attribute, in my opinion, of a leader is that growth, development, self-reflection, and it changes all of us. You change just by maturation, but an event like this causes, I think, a deeper, more impactful change to your decision-making and your process. As you said, you left the West Coast and went to the East Coast. Benny jumped right back in the fight. I decided I never wanted to be in charge of a platoon again and went and did the singleton, at least as much singleton as I could. And I did some great, fun, meaningful deployments is a better word after that, but it was only putting myself in harm's way. It wasn't directing other guys to get into harm's way. That was my path afterwards. But I think, to my point, is that even if we had done the AAR, and I've been and sat through a couple of briefings where someone would come out and talk about, the mission, all they want to talk about is the mission, but no one ever wants to talk about what went wrong and why. And because it's like it's a negative or black mark on the community versus looked at as an attribute to learn from our mistakes. We compartmentalize it individually, and as a community, we compartmentalize those events that are tragic and that, weren't anticipated, planned for, and that, happened. At least in my experience, in my exposure.
The difficult conversations. You have to have the difficult conversations from which the most learning takes place.
Because nobody wants to hear what they did wrong. Nobody wants to talk about the lessons learned. And as we talked about earlier, we live on a 2-year cycle, especially as leaders. In most venues, especially the military, in our community, we live on 2-year cycles. So you've got 2 years to make an impact and write a decent fit rep to get prepared for the next gig. So you really don't have the time invested, you spend the first 6 months figuring out the new command or the new job. You spend the last 6 months getting ready for the next gig. So you got a year to come up with something to make a change so that you have something to put into the fit rep. And that's not all bad. It's just, it's cyclic and it's short. So I think we could do a much better job learning from both positive and negative.
So if and we're in Boulder, Colorado recording this, if I pulled 10 people off the street right now and said, hey, have you ever heard of Michael Monsoor? The answer is probably no. And especially for our youth, this is somebody who should be talked about in school, not for the component of war, for the component of such selflessness and sacrifice. What, you're looking at an audience right now. What would you want them to know about Mikey? About the amazing, not perfect, but the amazing individual he was, and how we can all strive to be a little more like Mikey.
First off, I'd say like just his hard work ethic. Like he never complained about anything. Like if the mission entailed him being a communicator and an automatic weapons gunner, and like if for whatever reason he had to carry something else, he never complained about it. Like he would man up and just do it. So like his hard work ethic, I think, was definitely a huge attribute that he carried. And he was definitely a humble person. Like I definitely feel I carry my humility or my humblenism, and if that's a word, based off of him.
Nothing came easy to him.
No.
He was not the most talented SEAL. Nothing came easy, but he just no quit.
No quit. Yep.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, the greatest attributes Mikey possessed was his humility, his loyalty to the team, to the fight, his selflessness and sacrifice, obviously. And it's unfortunate that, as you alluded to, a lot of people don't know who he is or what he did, and they should. I mean, there's one, just for the greatness of the individual, that served his country. But as we're talking about, what makes a great leader, finding the uniqueness within someone and forcing them or encouraging them to get outside of their comfort zone, get outside of that box, and get better at what you're not good at. That's going to help you become not only competent but confident in your abilities. And he represented all of those things. I used to say it as a shooting instructor. I can train you and make you competent, and I can mentor you to make you confident, because you got to have the competency to run a gun. You got to have the confidence to take the shot. But it translates to anything else we do in this world, corporate or otherwise. I mean, you got to find those uniquenesses within each individual, find out what they enjoy, find out what they're passionate about. You kind of got to pull those strings, peel back those layers, and encourage development. Because, be honest, most people either lack the initiative, the drive, or a skill set, a competency, or the confidence to succeed. And I think great leaders find those things and help do all three of the things I said earlier: coach, teach, and mentor. Mikey certainly represented the best in all of us, and had the humility to live his life that way.
He was a quiet dude. He was a man of few words. He didn't need to. He spoke through his actions. Do you guys remember what he wrote under the bill of his cover?
It was like never quit, or
I will never quit.
I'll never quit. Yeah.
I will never quit.
I'll never quit. But yeah, his other line was no regrets.
Yeah, no regrets.
No regrets?
Yeah.
No regrets.
Okay.
I remember when his mother had those dog tags made for us.
Yeah.
I mean, that was his mantra was,
it's on his tombstone. No regrets. Live your life so that the fear of death can never enter your heart. And he lives up to that. I think the thing that Again, you find this out after the fact of what he'd written to his mom. But you guys remember the line, "I'm with the boys, and that's as good as it gets"? He'd written that. "I'm with the boys, and that's as good as it gets."
That's awesome.
He believed in his tribe, and we were his tribe. And a testament to his character that you guys have just described, he was willing to give his life to protect anyone in that tribe. Do you guys feel fortunate I say that day was my worst day, and it was also my best day. Worse than that, we lost Mikey. But I feel fortunate that very few people ever see such a act of sacrifice like that. And I feel fortunate when I say that. It's not, I wish I didn't have to see that, is that he was in our lives.
For the aspect of Mikey, of course, fortunate to have been in his company, to have seen something that selfless. And obviously, parts of our lives, our children, my son Evan, is only here because of that. But I think you struggle. We obviously are struggling right now, but you struggle with what happened. And, a lot of internal strife and self-reflection. I think there's, I read it. I don't know who said it, and it's not bravado. I don't think warriors are meant to survive the battlefield. Otherwise, we wouldn't have 22, 23 soldiers killing themselves every day via suicide. And we wouldn't have such a tough time transitioning back to the normal world. That's just a fact. At least it is for me. It's difficult. You learn, you grow, you're educated, and you live your life doing a thing, getting to the Super Bowl, and then it's over. And you have to figure out what's next. And hopefully it's family. Hopefully it's our wives and our kids and our loved ones. But that in itself is difficult for a lot of guys and girls.
Well, there's trauma with war. And we'll continue to deal with that. And that's life. And we're not going to move on easily knowing that Mikey's not with us. But the best parts of him are with us. When you talk about him like you are now. But for all those veterans listening, as you talked about veteran suicide, you got to look at the bright side too. We few. We happy few. We band of brothers. For he who sheds his blood with me today is forever my brother. It's been 15 years on September 29th, 1 week from now. 15 years since we've sat down or forced ourselves to sit down and have this talk. And I don't want it to be another 15 years. And my concern for you guys too is I want you guys to be freaking happy. And I know Mikey would want us all to smile and live our lives. Any last thoughts you want to share with the listeners about Mikey, or just the ordeal all in and of itself?
It was an honor to live and serve with Mikey. Like Doug kind of hit, my kids know who Mikey was. I try to instill the characteristics that Mikey, taught and I carry, instill and try to teach those to my kids. Even as when I was an instructor, I tried to tell Mikey's story to all the new students coming up to become Navy SEALs, his story, just because it needs to be told, because he's one of the best. He is the best. And like I say, it's truly been an honor. I
can only echo that. I did the same thing as a BUDS instructor. it's tough, but sometimes you get there, they want to hear the story, or they've heard, they get to know that, you were there and they want to hear. So you tell the story the best you can. It was certainly an honor to serve with him and with you guys. I guess the best piece of advice I ever got was, from Mike's dad. And it was the brief moment we talked, and it was, just, live a happy life. Enjoy your life.
Was that at the USS Monsoor commissioning?
That was when we initially came home and we first met the family. Didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to engage. And haven't really engaged with him since. I spoke to him briefly at the commissioning, but he was a Vietnam era warrior, so can't imagine what that's like, and not sure if one of my children will follow in the military footsteps, and obviously that's always at the forefront of your mind and concern, how I personally would handle that. But all I can say is Mikey was the best, and he embodied the best of all of us.
An amazing family, an amazing man. Guys, I've learned that we don't say this enough, and I'm going to close this way. I love you guys.
Love you too.
Love you too,
I genuinely love you guys. And I want you to be happy. And I'm sorry for not keeping up with you the way I should. And I know you feel the same way.
Same, yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for opening up on a subject that, quite frankly, none of us want to talk about, and showing that even the most elite of our warriors can show vulnerability, which right now is rare in the society that we have. So, guys, I thank you. Safe travels home. I love you.